Good afternoon.
Yeah, Ashley, you won't be able to have two computers in the same room.
Thank you guys all for joining us today. We have a couple of technical difficulties that will get resolved really quickly, and then very excited about a great agenda today with some great panelists here that is going to be able to share some great information. So just to be mindful of time, we're going to go ahead and get started. If for whatever reason you did not register today, if you could provide your information in that chat box, that would be really helpful. And just know this chat box is here all during this webinar for us to be able to communicate and share information and strategies. And so before we get started today, as we plan this webinar, we planned it with the intention of providing support to families and children during a pandemic. And I think right now it's important, now more than ever, that we continue to collaborate to support our youth and families, and that we acknowledge the things that are going on in our community, not only with the global pandemic, but with the horrific racial injustices, inequities, and systemic racism within our community that continues to impact and take the lives of Black Americans. This is everyone's issue. This is something that we as a community need to continue to have conversations about. And I want to open this collaborative to any opportunity to continue to support healthy dialogue and communications on how we can combat racial injustices and provide a space for healthy dialogue for our children and peers. So again, I want to thank everybody for being here today. I think it's really important that we continue to provide support and strategies for our kids and families and provide coping strategies. So while we were here today to talk about ways to manage school stressors, I just want to think of you guys to think about the things that are continuing to impacting our youth, who we often are seeing at the front lines of protests across the country and within our own community. And so with that, we will jump in today's webinar. I'm really excited about the participants that we have here, and I also would like to acknowledge our school partners who help coordinate and plan today's webinars. But before we get started, I do want to go over a couple of housekeeping bullet points just to make sure that this webinar goes as smoothly as possible. I am going to ask that if you are not speaking, if you could please mute your computer or phone as well as your camera. That will allow us to have the maximum bandwidth for this and hopefully reduce any opportunities for any other technical difficulties. Also, please use that chat box. While we have panelists who are sharing strategies today, parents and participants, we know that you guys have great ideas as well. And so please use that chat box to share those ideas. I have helpers that are helping me facilitate this webinar. We'll be copying those recommendations and sending them out. And any resources that we share today will be uploaded to the Kids Mental Health Pierce County website as well. This meeting is being re-recorded, so if you have to leave early, we will be recording this webinar and it will be shared to our website as well. Again, I want to thank you guys all for being here. If you're not familiar with the work of Kids Mental Health Pierce County, we are a community collaborative of professionals and agencies in Pierce County that are working together to develop a system of care for youth here in Pierce County in the behavioral health system. We have 4 priority actions of working towards improving youth mobile crisis services, access care coordination, ultimately with the goal of having a family wellness center in the workforce to support that work. For more information about Kids Mental Health Pierce County, you can visit our website at kidsmentalhealthpiercecounty.org, and I'll be sharing that link today at the end of the meeting. So before we get started today, we want to start with just a couple of polls that will help us share some information with our panelists today. And so that first question, since we're talking about stress and how we're managing it, we just want to know, how have you been managing your stress so far? Have you been doing hobbies, meditation, mindfulness, therapy, reading? If it's something else, type that in the chat box. And then also, we want to know what grades your children or child is in if you're here and you're a parent today. Are they preschool, elementary school, middle school, high school, multiple? Let us know, and that will just really help us to be able to answer questions and help guide the information that we're sharing today. So I'll give you a couple more minutes to complete that. All right, so it looks like 59% of people are doing those hobbies. We got meditation, 28%, mindfulness, therapy, reading, other. Let's see what's in the chat box for other. All right. And then for ages, it looks like we have a good percentage of elementary school parents, middle school, preschool, high school, and multiple. So that's great. Looks like we have a great representation from a lot of ages and stages. So I think we'll have a great dialogue here today. All right. All right. So again, I want to thank our school partners who helped coordinate and plan today's webinar. Specifically, I want to thank Dr. Glenn Malone, previously of Puyallup School District, now with Mossy Ross School District, and Dr. Jeannie Lehrberg with Sumner Bonnie Lake School District, and Claudia Miller with Franklin Pierce School District. We really did our best to include various representation from school districts within Pierce County so that we can have a large conversation and a diverse conversation that really represents Pierce County as a whole. And I think we'll have a great conversation today. So I am going to introduce our first panelist, who I am so excited to have here today. Melissa Porter, or Missy Porter, is a school counselor at Washington Elementary in Tacoma School District. And I have to share that Melissa participated in our first webinar, and her participation really, and her words of encouragement really resonated with a lot of us. And so it was great to be connected to her, to have her participate in today's webinar. So just to give you a little bit of background about Missy, Missy is presently serving as the elementary school counselor at Washington Elementary in the Tacoma School District. She is also an instructor in the principal certification program at Pacific Lutheran University. She began her career in education as a middle school counselor and has practiced in a nonprofit setting providing grief and loss services for individuals experiencing a life-threatening illness or the traumatic death of a loved one. During her career in Tacoma, she has served as a school and family liaison for the School, Family, and Community Partnership Program and was honored as an outstanding child advocate by the City of Tacoma PTA. Melissa prides herself on building radical relationships with all individuals in her care and is passionate about aiding in the dismantling of systems of oppression in education. She is a lifelong Chicago Cubs fan and lives locally in Abundance with her Butterball Labrador Retriever Wingman in life, Wrigley, who thinks everybody is her friend. So I'm going to hand it over to Missy Porter for her presentation. Thank you, Missy, for being here today.
Oh, you're most welcome, Ashley, and thank you for your introduction and invitation today. It's certainly my pleasure to be in virtual company with you and so many other fine people in our community, not to mention the other gifted professionals with whom I share today's stage. This pandemic has, well, let me back up. I happen to be, I am not a Black or brown bodied individual, but I am a white ally. And I think the things that are happening in our country, you know, I'm enraged and grief stricken. And I want to acknowledge being part of the solution and not part of the problem. And I'm grateful for your words in the opening today. We have much to think about. And today I was invited, of course, to speak regarding the pandemic, which has definitely turned our world upside down. You know, the onset of COVID-19 is unprecedented as an event in our history. And our children are suffering from the stress associated with all of the upheaval. Many of our children are experiencing worries. We're finding in Tacoma, in consulting with my colleagues, many of our students' worries are rooted in grief and loss themes. The fear of dying, the fear of relatives dying, the fear of what it means to receive medical treatment now, the absence of routines, the structure and stimulation of school life virtually coming to an end. You know, older youth feeling like they're in a position of an educational lag, recognizing the limitations of technology, family job loss, economic hardship, isolation from friends and social support that is essential for healthy mental well-being, and certainly family strife playing a part in this in all of its forms without places for kids to go to get away from any strife. Each and all and many more of things are definitely taking a toll on the well-being of our kids. And excuse me, in Tacoma, before the pandemic, we have 30,000 kids roughly in Tacoma, and 1 in 5 of our kids we know comes to school with a mental health related concern and or a trauma background. And this was before the pandemic. And so that equates to about 6,000 kids. Only 20% of those kids, our data suggests, are receiving care and support for their needs. And so that's 1,200 out of 6,000. And we anticipate many more children when we return in the fall as having additional, well, we anticipate more children having impacts from trauma associated with the virus and the rioting, and then possibly some mental health related concerns as well. So we anticipate our numbers rising, and we're preparing accordingly for that. And let me be really clear about my message today. I'm imploring all of our listeners to put connection with children before scholastic content. There is absolutely, I'm imploring you to put social, emotional health and well-being in front of academics at this time. I need families and community members to share your calm, your strength, your love, your laughter with children during these challenging times to compete with their worries. And I think in so doing, if we focus on social emotional health, we can minimize the potential for trauma, further trauma in our youth, and certainly inspire resiliency in our young people as we navigate these challenging times. We know, again, my colleagues and I talking, children are experiencing the pandemic from the bubble of their family, and stressed out families tend to have stressed out kids. And so it really starts with us as the adults for modeling emotional regulation and mindfulness and language that's supportive and compassionate to help us manage big feelings and worries. So Ashley had asked that I have a few ideas for the audience to consider, one of which includes the 3 R's for emotional regulation. I have a couple of slides on language, specific language we should be using with our kids, and then a mindfulness exercise that I really believe in. So Ashley, if you'd be kind enough to throw up that slide on the 3 R's. I often tell kids that when we get upset, our basal ganglia, that little back part of our brain, sometimes becomes like a tiger, and we've got to learn how to tame it so that we can get to our prefrontal cortex, or that part of our brain that is responsible for executive functioning and helps us make good decisions. Dysregulation occurs when the brain responds to input that triggers an alarm. And a lot of our kids have sharp edges right now because their alarm's going off quite a bit. And it is harder for them to comprehend and listen and cope when they're in that tiger space. And so the idea with the 3 R's is to manage dysregulated emotion. And And when you're regulating with your child, when you're helping your child regulate, you're focusing on soothing them, making them feel calm and safe and loved. And I'd encourage audience members to throw in the chat box things you do to help calm and comfort and make your children feel safe and loved, and even things that are comforting to you, that help you calm when you're upset. Without emotional regulation, it's very difficult for children to relate to the adults that are trying to care for them. And so that regulation is critical to getting to the next step, which is relating to the child who's upset or disappointed or afraid. And at this stage, you want to validate your child's feelings with words, comforting words and tone of voice. Like, I know you're upset right now. This is really hard. You're discouraged. This will pass. We'll get through this together. It's relating is about focusing and connecting with your child, focusing on and connecting. And then once you have the emotion under control and you've got that relationship, that energy in the relationship back, then it's time to reason. And reasoning is really a lot like cognitive behavioral therapy. Once your child is calm, then it's time to talk about alternatives, the alternatives to the behaviors that aren't working for them, while of course reinforcing the limits you've set for their behavior. And I must say, when I do this with kids, I talk with them about, wow, you were able to manage yourself and manage your feelings. This is fantastic. You're a self-manager. Look at what you've done. And now we're connecting. And now I'm thinking to myself, what could you have done differently in those moments before? What might you have done differently? And then they come up with solutions on their own. And then you get to say, well done, well done. You have an inner coach inside, and look at you. You're handling your situation. Kids love it. And until a child is regulated, it's unlikely that they'll be able to relate to you and feel connected. And until a child relates, they're unlikely to have the mental capacity to reason with you. That's why the 3 R's are just so important, because it's all about managing and taming that tiger. Without taming the tiger, you can't get to executive functioning and be able to flip the switch and do something different. I imagine we've got some great comments in the chat box, so I'm excited about that. Ashley, would you mind going to the next slide? I think here we're going to see some problem-focused language versus solution-focused language. I love this stuff. Rather than telling a child, you know, wow, you're being bossy right now, man, you have some natural leadership qualities. You're visionary. Or a child that's being defiant. Man, those beliefs you're sharing are really strong. You're very determined. I wonder how we can put that determination to good work and to use. Oppositional kids get lots of bad breaks in school, a lot of mistaken beliefs about our oppositional kiddos. They often just see the world from a different perspective, and focusing on that really helps build rapport and relationship and minimize discord. Maybe the next slide, Ash, I think I'm aware of time. Again, here, this loving family member with a child, holding space for kids, rather than trying to fix things, saying, this is really hard, rather than saying, well, you know, let's look at it this way. It's really not that bad. Please calm down. You're going to be fine. You want to validate a child's feelings and say, I know this hurts. Hold space for them. Be silent. You know, companion with them in whatever's bothering them. This is a struggle for you. It's really hard. I see you. I love you. I care about you. We'll get through this together. Holding space, absolutely critical. Next slide, Ash. And then here, this is, a lot of parents have been really worried right now about, my kid isn't doing their work. I'm worried about the teacher and what the teacher's going to think. All of these activities count as learning, and these are all relational things and artistic things, opportunities for kids to express themselves in more symbolic manners. The learning packet is important, but it's not as important as the relationship and the connection together and play. Kids' work is their play is their work. And now is a time in our history where we can allow them more freedom to do things that bring us closer together. The other thing I wanted to get to before I begin the wind down is emotional regulation for some kids that are highly sensitive, or kids that are on the spectrum, like children with autism, perhaps. You might think about, if they're having trouble managing feelings and settling down, I like to do an exercise with kids called the sensory game. And what I ask kids to do, and I got to tell you, 98 times out of 100, it's worked. I ask kids, even when they're having trouble breathing, because they're so upset, I'll ask them, breathe with me and tell me 5 things you see. And then they do. And then I say, okay, now breathe with me again. Tell me 4 things you like to touch, or 4 things you'd like to touch in this room. And then they do. And then I say, breathe with me again. And I tell them 3 things you like to hear, or 3 things you want to hear. And then they do. And then I say, breathe again. 2 things you want to taste or like to taste. And then 1 more breath, and share with me 1 thing you'd like to smell or smell right now. And I'm telling you, that sensory exercise brings them right back to a place where they're in a more manageable space with their feelings. I absolutely love that exercise. Let's see, a couple things, other things I want to share for resources. Oh my goodness, my time is up. I'll hurry. Zones of Regulation. All of these books are online. Buy it. It's worth your time and energy and expense. Look up Puppy Dogs and Ice Cream Books Publishing. The Zen Pig. Fantastic. Zen Pig teaches us how feelings are clouds. Zen Pig teaches us about the art of gratitude, where you find love, all that's needed, and what we're here to do. And then a couple other books called The Big Life Journal and Just Being Me. Perfect for nurturing emotional awareness, relationship skills, self-reflection, all kinds of stuff. These books, can't emphasize it enough. Last slide, Ashley, and then I got 30 seconds. 30 seconds for my last slide. Elephant. This is what I think of when I am emotionally vulnerable. I'm the calf and the elephant is my mom, and we are reciting a poem by Rumi that goes in between the places of wrongdoing and right doing, there is a meadow. Find me there. And I imagine my mom and I just standing in a meadow, looking at each other, loving each other, and knowing that we can manage whatever it is together. So, and I wish the same for you, with you and your family, and thank you for this opportunity today. I'm sorry I went over, Ashley. Bye for now.
Thank you, Missy. That was absolutely amazing. And there was some great dialogue in the chat box as well. Other participants sharing their strategies, and people expressing they already felt calmer with your exercise, Missy. So thank you again for those great strategies.
You're welcome.
Again, Missy's going to be around for the duration of the webinar. If you have questions, please put them in the chat box. We are paying attention to that and documenting those questions. And we will have a section of time towards the end where Missy and the other participants will be able to answer those questions. So again, Missy, thank you again for your participation in that wonderful presentation.
My pleasure, Ash. Thank you.
So we're going to transition to our next panelist, Sue Vandervoort. She is a MTSS behavior coordinator at Sumner Bonnie Lake School District. And we are so excited to have her here today. And we're having a little bit of feedback, so I'm going to ask if you are not speaking, if you could please mute your speaker and your camera. Thank you.
So actually, it's Amanda's.
Thank you. So I would like to take this time to introduce Sue. Sue has over 20 years of experience in the field of education, specifically working with students with emotional and behavior challenges. Throughout her career, she has worked as a paraeducator, a special education teacher, a district behavior specialist, and a district PBIS coordinator. Susan has extensive experience in helping district and school teams develop and sustain systems and strategies to effectively support students with academic and behavioral challenges across all 3 tiers of intervention. Susan is currently a MTSSB coordinator for the Sumner Bonnie Lake School District. And for any of the participants who doesn't know what MTSSB is, it's the multi-tiered system of support for behavior. I looked that up myself today. So I'm going to transition to Sue's presentation. And thank you again, Sue, for your participation today.
Well, thank you, Ashley, for inviting me to participate in this month's webinar. Again, my name is Sue Vandervoort. I am the MTSS coordinator for the Sumner Bonnie Lake School District. I do have 2 kids, they're in their 20s now, but over the years, we've definitely had challenges, but they're doing great now. So I also want to just give a big shout out to the caregivers and parents because all the expectations that are put on you these days, you're doing amazing. So keep up the good work and my hat's off to you. I don't see my slide, Ashley, or my presentation.
Yes, I am pulling it up right now as we speak.
So my goal today is actually to give parents and caregivers some evidence-based behaviors strategies that we use in our schools. And all these strategies can be easily adapted for home. Are you there, Ashley?
I am. Am I at the right slide for you?
Not seeing any slides. I'm just seeing my name.
Okay.
It looks like it needs to be advanced 1 slide, Ash. This is Chris, but it's just showing the initial slide on the screen.
Okay.
There we go.
All right. Sorry about that.
It's okay. So if you could go to the next slide, please, that'd be great. Okay, so parents and caregivers, this is all really about taking care of yourself. The best way that you can really help your child is really to model these behaviors that I have listed on the screen. This will definitely promote social and emotional wellness in the household. So make sure that you're eating healthy, getting enough sleep, eating a balanced diet, and again, having a lot of fun. Take time to enjoy some fun. The little last bullet on the screen is a daily check-in. So you want to take some time to connect with your child every morning, preferably in the morning, or even throughout the whole day. So let's talk a little bit about the daily check-in and then making some feel-good plans for the day. So next slide, please. So when you do your check-in in the morning, and these are important because it's a way of connecting with your child. So you really want to start with like a feeling chart, of emotion chart. It's important to, I'm trying to read what's on my screen here, sorry. So it's important to use a feel-good chart. This helps us recognize our feelings and label our emotions. Emotions drive attention. They drive learning, memory, and even decision-making. And so it's important to be able to label our feelings and to communicate how we're feeling. And then, of course, to regulate. So when you check in with your child, just try to use one of these feeling charts. And then you want to develop, when you're checking in with them in the morning, you want to develop a feel-good plan for them. So the feel-good plans or bliss list examples, these are just a plan of what you're going to do when you have difficult feelings during the day. So you just generate a list of things that your child's, would like to do to help get through these difficult feelings. Because we really want to be able to go from like, whether we're mad or frustrated, into a more calm state so we can actually put us in a better space to learn. Next slide. In our schools, Sumner Valley Lake School District, all of our schools have school-wide expectations. Most of our schools, elementary schools anyways, we have one high school though, that have safe, responsible, and respectful for their expectations. You can see that they're labeled across the top. I'm safe, responsible, respectful. And then down the left-hand side is our routines. And so for each routine, this is the expectations for being safe, responsible, and respectful. You really want to teach these expectations explicitly. So you want to model them and then have the student model them. And then it's going to be important too to review these expectations before each routine. And so you can see the school routine being safe. So staying in the work area, use approved websites. So teaching those, reviewing those to your students. And then under responsible, set supplies, make a plan, finish assigned work. So again, teaching these expectations. So I would encourage you to make a matrix like this, and it's actually a teaching matrix, and then it gives you the same language to use every time you teach the expectation. Next, let's talk about routines and schedule. So the next slide. So another preventative strategy for at home is coming up with a routine or a schedule. Consistency is really important, and it makes the day predictable too for your child. So what you want to do is time limits. So you don't really want to go over 30 minutes. So between 20 to 30 minutes for each activity, and then break it down. So that, like you can see the first one, it's like a check-in or breakfast. And then I also put visuals on my schedules, which also helps for kids. And then this particular schedule, I actually have a point system on the right-hand side. So around those expectations of being safe, respectful, responsible. So if you didn't have to give any reminders, you can, a 2, right? This is another way for a student to really self-monitor themselves too and their behavior. You also want to create breaks in there in your schedule. And let's see what else. And movement breaks too. And one thing that I always try to do too is if there's a particular time of day that's difficult for your child, or even math, a subject. So have math, but follow it with a more preferred activity, and this will help increase compliance. And then last is align your child's schedule with your schedule. Okay, next slide. These are specific strategies that you can do during the academic time. So again, teach and model those expectations first. Use specific praise. So instead of just saying, good job, you want to say, boy, I feel proud of you when you finish your assignments. Way to be responsible. So you want to be really specific in your praise. The next one, reinforce positive behavior. What I mean by this is you can use star charts or even like that point system I had on the schedule. Those are ways that you can reinforce positive behavior. Give choices. Would you want to do your math first or your reading first? So that's another option you can try. Sometimes kids are overwhelmed with the length of the assignments, so you may want to shorten them up and get them into smaller chunks. Preparing for transitions. So you want to give them, let them know like 10 more minutes until we're done, 5 more minutes. And so allowing them, again, predictability and consistency. And then again, I just covered kind of physical movement and breaks. Next slide, please. Self-regulation, how big is your problem? So this, we really want to match our response to the behavior. And we really want our kids to be independent problem solvers, and we want to build resiliency. So you could create this with your child. And so identifying different size of problems and then identify what they're going to do. And another thing you can put in here is some of your feel-good list ideas. And I did, this is one of the resources I did send. There's an empty template that you can use with your, to create this. Next slide. So how to calm or de-escalate when a child has strong feelings. So first thing is, you know, they're not going to really listen to a lot if you string out your phrases or words. So you want to, the rule of 5 is just use short, simple words and phrases. Again, give them choices. Make sure that the choices are okay when you present them to them. Time and space. So always give time and space when a child is escalated. Redirect, bring them back to the expected behavior. You may also want to refer to the feel-good list right here. Like, is there something on this list that you can do? And again, taking those deep breaths, counting is another thing, option they could do. Silence, you know your child best and what works for them, but silence is another way that you can help de-escalate. Use directive, directives, not questions, and then nonverbal communication. So the more nonverbal communication we use, it's going to really minimize of getting into a power struggle. Next slide. Specific words to be used that you can use to help calm your child. I specifically like the what calming strategies can you use on your feel-good plan. And then again, just remind them that they are safe and this feeling will pass. And then I'm going to leave you with some resources here on next slide. So there are some resources there for you, some websites. Books on emotions and feelings, that's website there. You could see if your counselor at your school has any of these books, or you can actually go to the King County Library System. So, all right, that's it. And I thank you for having me. And I'll be at the end for questions. Still here.
Thank you, Sue, so much for those strategies. Sue will be here at the end of our presentation today for any questions that you may have. I'm really grateful for your participation today, and this was really, really, really helpful information for us today.
Thank you, Ashley, and I will turn on my video.
It's okay. Yes, and please, again, if you have any questions, please make sure that you share that with us. Any feedback, please, we'd be open to that as well. So I'm going to transition to our next speaker, Amanda Scott Thomas. So fortunate to have her here. Amanda's a great member of the Kids Mental Health Pierce County Steering Committee. So just to give you a little bit of background about Amanda, Amanda's career spans 20 years in public service. A graduate of the Evergreen State College, Tacoma, she has worked in the nonprofit sector as well as public health education, positive youth development, community building, and state policy. Amanda also served as an administrator in the Office of Community and Youth Development for the Arizona Governor's Office in Phoenix, Arizona. The wealth of experience has provided her with the skill set necessary to serve Tacoma's young people and community as Director of Community Partnership, Academic Equity, and Achievement. Amanda was formerly the Education Policy Director for Schools Out Washington, an education agency dedicated to providing resources and guidance for organizations that give young people safe places to learn and grow outside of school. She continues to support the mission and vision of Schools Out Washington by serving as a board member. At TPS, Amanda is committed to achieving district's goals to fully engage parents, community staff, and young people in the education of our children. Amanda and her husband Shannon consider service to the community their lifestyle and are proud parents of 2 adult children. Also, social media shout out, follow her on Twitter at amanda.a.edu. And just again, just so you know, any resources, links, all this information, the PowerPoint as well will be uploaded into our Kids Mental Health Pierce County website. So at this time, I'm going to transition over to Amanda. Give us about 30 seconds to transition over and get her information up as well.
All right.
Let me turn my volume down.
Okay.
Here. Do you think you could just sit here?
If I need to. Okay. I don't see myself, but. This video is on.
Yeah, we want to see it.
Okay, can everybody see me? Can you thumbs up if you can see and hear me?
We can hear you and see you well, Amanda.
Awesome, awesome. So hello to everybody. Thank you for staying on. This is the first time I put on actual makeup and real clothes in a couple of weeks. I have been out in the community doing meal distribution and school supply distribution. So it's good to be here today. I'm happy to share. Okay, so to get started, they asked me to speak today about family resilience, which is a subject matter very close to my heart for many reasons. And some of that will probably surface as I go through today's presentation. But I wanted to start off with just framing our conversation with some definitions of what family resilience is. And so, of course, I went to textbook and have some definitions for what family resilience is all about. And we know at the start that families are diverse. They look different. They're biological. They're not biological. They're multi-generational. They're single parents. They're two-parent. And they are sometimes family who we choose. But in all of that, a resilient family has some specific elements that have really focusing on responding and recovering from adversity and crisis. And so that's what a resilient family does. It really bounces back. And so we're going to talk a little bit today about how to increase some of those elements in your own family and maybe families around you. Next slide. Okay. Oh, those were the definitions. Sorry, I didn't know I was doing my own slides. So those are the definitions for you to take a look at. Again, unique qualities, strengths, skills that adapt or enable a family to adapt to changes, to really pivot. These qualities are something definitely needed in the time and that we're living in. And again, those are some textbook definitions. The other thing that I wanted to talk about in regard to family resilience, there's lots of models for what family resilience and frameworks, but this one I really liked because it focused on some elements that I think are very important to a resilient family, and that is really that resilient families have shared beliefs. And so those beliefs could be value systems, they could be faith systems, but there's a sharing of a belief, a family belief system. And then we know that those can be diverse in families, but there is a commonality in a family where they're walking in unity. There is in family resilience, the textbook definition, it's organized. There is some sort of organization. And when I talk about organization, it's mostly connectedness. There is a connection between family members or folks that are living in a family context. The other element of a resilient family is communication. And we know that if you have a family, like I have a family with teenagers, adult children, communication can sometimes be a challenge, but it is an ongoing work around having positive communication, having a level of openness, sharing, and problem solving together. We know that all these things, beliefs, organization, and communication are all relational elements of family resilience. So that's the textbook a framework around family resilience, but I want to get into sort of practical reality of this context and kind of what we're all immersed in. And so that's the next slide. The next slide talks about, and I don't know if you've seen this, but this is the pair of ACEs. And ACEs is adverse childhood experiences, but the pair of ACEs has to do with the adverse community environments. And so I thought that this was pretty salient for the times that we're experiencing now with the pandemic, also with racial tensions in our cities and in our country. There are things that we see on the surface, and there's always things beneath. So resilient families have to contend with lots of issues, issues around mental health, emotional abuse, substance abuse, domestic violence, homelessness, incarceration, physical neglect, emotional neglect, and divorce. Those are some of the adverse childhood experiences that may have touched your lives or the lives of your family. And then we have adverse community environments, which are systemic issues that families contend with around poverty, racial discrimination, community disruption, violence, poor housing quality. These are all system issues that families contend with on a day-to-day basis. And so while we have the textbook theory of what family resilience looks like in the context of adverse childhood experiences, adverse community environments, it can really be a challenge to be a resilient family or to see the resilience in your family. And so today's talk is really about optimizing those characteristics and those elements of resilience in your own family. So with all those issues, and there are a lot of issues that we're all dealing with, a lot of challenges, one of the first things that I wanted to admonish all the listeners, and it sounds a little cliche at this point, but it's very true, that you need to put your own mask on first. So as a parent, as a caregiver, as someone in a family, take care of yourself. In the words of one of my favorite authors, Toni Morrison, if you like Black historical fiction, she wrote a book called The Bluest Eyes, which is a Black classic. I recommend it if you're using reading as something, one of your coping mechanisms. But one of her famous quotes that I love is she said is that you are your own best thing. And so we know that if we're not taking care of ourselves, it's very hard to take care of other folks. And so it's very important now more than ever. And this is not just a cliche about, splurging on yourself, but really it is about disrupting toxic stress, because that toxic stress does trickle down. And I know years having been a single mother, working full-time, going to school for a time, full-time, the stress that I had during that time in my life did trickle down and impact my decision or my children. And so we know that toxic stress can affect brain development, it can affect learning, and it does impact young people. So whether you're trying to hold it together or not, the toxic stress stress that you're dealing with can transfer. So really do take care of yourself. It's very important. One of the things that I wanted to speak about, I was thinking about the families that I've been working with. I've been out in community, I've been engaging, I've been surrounding myself with friends and families via Zoom, via connection, but I wanted to talk about elements of a resilient family. So family resilience is not something that you either have or that you don't have. It's not fixed. I don't know if anybody's heard of Carol Dweck's work around the growth mindset. Family resilience is something that can evolve, it can grow, and it can continue, and can be improved. And so I wanted to use my own family, and at this time I'm very sensitive about my own social cultural lens. And so when I was putting this this presentation together, I thought about my own family, and I thought about the times that we're living in, and I thought I could use us as a great example. So this is a picture of my family. You see my husband and my 2 adult children. We are a very happy family, but this picture represents 4 people that have been impacted by generational teen pregnancy, divorce, food insecurity, the social welfare system, incarceration, and high school dropout. So that's what has impacted everybody in my family. This family is also the face of college-educated parents, 16 years of marriage, business owners, upward mobility, and the cycle of teen pregnancy broken. Those are all things represented in the same picture. And so to me, that gives a great idea or context for what family resiliency looks like. Our family, through the trials and triumphs, we had family assets, and every family has family assets. Our family assets were humor, love, determination, food, and faith. Those are the things that we had in common, around some common beliefs. And so I would encourage folks to really encourage other people around you and yourselves to look at your family's assets. What are you guys really good at? What do you really have as a family that's positive? And focus on those things, grow those things. And so I think it's very important at this time to be looking at how we are as families and what our assets are. It's not necessarily a smooth journey all the time, but the journey is well worth it. And so resilient families, in closing, I just wanted to encourage folks to do a couple of things to consider taking these 3 steps. One of the things that I talk to my family about, and I think is a strength and an element of a resilient family, is talking about our adversity, talking about our challenges, talking about how far we've come. Sometimes we don't reward ourselves for this progress that we have made and the steps that we have taken. So have your young folks talk to their grandparents and talk about some of the things that what they went through and how they overcame and got to the point where they're at, or some things that they've learned. So use your own family history to elevate resilience in your family. It's a protective factor. The other thing is to incorporate your children in your coping. Kids want to be a part of a team. They want to be a team player. They want to know that they're helping. And so one of the hardest things, I think, my daughter, when we talk about the struggle years, we call them, is that, she really wanted to help, and she did what she could to support me as a mom, doing dishes and making sure things in the household were taken care of. Give your kids a way to engage and support and cope along with you, that you guys can cope together in relationship. The third thing is extend your networks, yourself, your people. I had 2 teenagers, and there were specific subjects that I had found it very hard to talk to my daughter about. I didn't have the skills, or I was paralyzed in fear. And so what I did was I had made sure that my daughter had several aunties, and I have no sisters. So I had friends that became aunties, and they were her resources for things that were too much for me, or things things that I wasn't ready to maybe to deal with or have that conversation. And so I had trusted friends that came and wrapped themselves around my family and supported my children in some decisions that they were making. And I knew that our values and our beliefs were aligned, so I felt comfortable having them go to their auntie to ask a question or to deal with something. So extend your networks. Parents, even during this pandemic, get on Zoom, make phone calls, but reach out. And sometimes it's good to talk to somebody that's like outside of your house, especially in the days of the pandemic. So friends can offer sage advice. The next thing that I wanted to do in closing is to connect you with some community resources. I'm not sure how this is going out to you, but there will be some, I think, links. There's usually an after email, and the links will be in there, but you can Google them yourself. But Graduate Tacoma has a COVID-19 directory. And so what we've been directing our schools to, or our families to at Tacoma Public School, is to connect with the Graduate Tacoma COVID-19 directory. You can enter whatever your need is and a resource will pop up. And so resilient families look for resources and take advantage of resources that are out there in the community to support you. Also, Lincoln High School has a community resource COVID guide that is online. We'll send the link with that too. They update it regularly, but that's also another source of good information. And then we're going to be sending out after this presentation, they'll be sending out information about the Tacoma Public Schools school supply distribution. For the month of June, we're working with several partners. I think there are 5 to 6 locations, Monday through Friday, where you can go up and pick up school supplies for your young folks. So we know that you're having to do distance learning and folks are running out of supplies. And so we're going to have that information with you too. So that's another element of resilient families. They avail themselves of resources and we're trying to meet those needs for you. The last slide that I have, I wanted to inform folks that there is, or this is second to last, there's a Kids Creating Change webinar. Join us in learning about anti-racism. This is happening Friday at 10:30. You can register online and receive your Zoom link. The sessions are only 35 minutes long, but it's a lot of good information. I know the young lady that's facilitating this, and so I would recommend that you take advantage of this. Resilient Families, again, optimized resources. This is another resource for maybe a subject matter that you don't feel comfortable talking about or wish you had more information. I encourage you to participate in that. And then lastly, my last slide has to do with our upcoming plans to develop another webinar talking to kids about race and racial equity. And so we know that we've been hit with this pandemic. We know that the pandemic has disproportionately impacted people of color, but the root, and we talked about dual ACEs, so the top of the tree and the roots, the root of the racial inequities that we're having, the COVID health disparities is a belief in white supremacy empowered by structural racism. And we want to unpack that a bit and equip parents and community members on how to talk about it and how to get active and how to support your friends and be allies and engage in this good work. So I appreciate your time today. I know we all have a lot going on, but believe in the power of resilience, believe in the power of your family. And again, resilience is not something that you either have or don't have. We all have it, and you can improve it and get better and grow your resilience. So thank you for your time today.
That was amazing. Thank you so much, Amanda, and a great way to wrap up the conversations, the amazing conversations that we've had today. I know that we were scheduled to go till 4 o'clock today, and so I understand if you have to log off, please know that this is a recorded webinar, but I did want to at least provide the opportunity to be able to ask any questions. We didn't get any pre-submitted questions. However, we still do have Missy, Sue, and Amanda is here in the room with me. She has not exited the building yet after that amazing presentation. Truly inspiring and just great information. And so I did want to just offer up the opportunity for any questions. You can either unmute yourself or you can ask it in the chat box. All right, if there are no questions, just know this is not a limited opportunity. You can always reach out through email. And so again, I wanted to thank everybody for being here. We know that there is a lot going on within our communities, and I appreciate your willingness to be here today. I do want to direct you to our Kids Mental Health Pierce County website. There are going to be all the information that was presented to you today. All the tools will be uploaded to the website. We also have an amazing campaign going on right now called Under This Mask is a Helper, where you can order a button. I have mine on today. As we continue to function in the world where we need to wear protective personal equipment, it's just a great way for us to help engage with kids to show that there is a person under the mask. And so if you go to our website, you can get a free button while supplies last. There's also various resources, and all the materials for today's webinar will be uploaded on there as well. So again, thank you guys all for being here, and enjoy your day. I'm going to end today's panel. And again, thank you to Missy, Sue, and Amanda for your participation today. The strategies that you shared, the information that you shared was truly valuable. And I'm excited, and thank you again for your support to this community and your collaboration with Kids Mental Health Pierce County.